Review of adding and subtracting fractions. One thing to always keep in mind when you are adding and subtracting fractions is that a fraction is a numerator over a denominator. So our numerator is on the top, our denominator is on the bottom. This line in between is really a division sign, which means that if we took the numerator and divided it by the denominator, we'd end up with the decimal equivalent of that fraction. Unless you are working with improper or mixed numbers, your fraction will always be less than 1. So unless you're working with an improper fraction where the numerator is greater than the denominator, or a mixed number where you have a whole number out in front beside the fraction, your fraction is actually less than 1. So it's only a part of one whole. So let's review the steps for adding and subtracting fractions. Step 1. The denominators must be equal, so they have to be the same number. So an example of this is if I had 1/4 and I was adding 2/4. Well, in this example, my denominator in both cases is 4, so my denominator is equal. It's the same, which means I can move on to step number 2. But that won't always be the case. Sometimes you'll have different denominators. So I might have 1/4 plus 1/2. I have a 4 and a 2 as my denominators. I have to find a common denominator, meaning I have to find a common multiple of these two numbers. So something that 2 goes into and something that 4 goes into. Well, luckily with this one, 2 goes into 4. If I multiply 2 by 2, I get 4. So if I multiply my second fraction by 2, I end up with a denominator of 4 on the bottom, because 2 times 2 equals 4. But my whole fraction has to be multiplied by 2. So because I've multiplied my denominator by 2 to get 4, I have to multiply my numerator by 2 as well. So 1 times 2 is 2. My denominators now, 4 and 4, are the same. And I can proceed to the next step. Sometimes you will have denominators that do not work out quite so easily. So if I have, for instance, 1/3 plus 1/8. Well, 3 doesn't go into 8 and 8 doesn't go into 3. But I still have to find a common multiple of these. The easiest thing to do is to multiply these two denominators together to figure out what my common denominator is going to be. In this case, 3 times 8 gives me 24. So I'm going to rewrite this question with denominators of 24. So to get that, I have 1/3 multiplied by 8 plus 1/8 multiplied by 3. 1 times 8 is 8. 3 times 8 is 24. 1 times 3 is 3. 8 times 3 is 24. Look, my denominators are the same. I have 24 on the bottom of each, so now I can continue on to step 2. Step 2 is that when we're adding and subtracting, we only add and subtract the numerators. Our denominators stay the same. So if I look at my first example, I had 1/4 plus 1/2, which I times by 2 to end up with 1/4 plus 2/4. My denominators are the same, so now I'm going to add my numerators because I have an addition sign here. So I'm going to add my numerators. 1 plus 2 gives me 3. 1 plus 2 equals 3. over. My denominators stay the same. So my denominator was 4 here, so it's going to continue to be 4. Let's look at my other example. I started off with 1/3, which I multiplied by 8, added to 1/8, which I multiplied by 3. And I left off with 8 over 24 plus 3 over 24. The same denominators. Now, step 2, I can add, because there's an addition, I can add my numerators. 8 plus 3 is 11. So I have 11 as my numerator. 8 plus 3 equals 11. My denominator is going to stay 24. My last step, I need to simplify. So simplifying means looking at my fraction. So if I'm looking at my end result here, 3 over 4, and I'm going to look and decide, can I reduce these numbers in any way to make my fraction have smaller numerators and denominators? But the catch is that you have to divide by the same number. Well, factors of 3 are 1 and 3. Factors of 4 are 1 and 4. So the only factor they share is 1, which won't get me anywhere. 3 divided by 1 is 3, 4 divided by 1 is 4, and the cycle will just keep repeating. So 3/4 is as low as I can make this fraction. That is the simplest form it comes in. What about 11 over 24? Well, again, the factors of 11 are 1 and 11. 24 can't be divided by 11. I'm not going to continually divide them by 1. So 11 over 24 is as low as that fraction will go. That is the simplest form of that fraction. Let's look at my first example again. So for my first example, I had 1/4 plus 1/2. What if I didn't realize that 2 goes into 4? So what if I use the same strategy that I used on my second question, where I multiply the denominators to find a common denominator? Let's try that. So I have 1 over 4 plus 1 over 2. I'm going to multiply these. 4 times 2 is 8. So my denominators I'm going to be working with are going to be 8. Okay, so to get that, I multiply the first fraction by 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. And I multiply the second fraction by 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So my denominators are the same. Now I can add my numerators. 2 plus 4 is 6, and my denominator stays 8. Well, 6 over 8, these are both two even numbers. So when working with even numbers, I know that even numbers are divisible by 2. So I'm going to divide both of these numbers, my 6 and my 8, by 2 to reduce this fraction, to simplify this fraction. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Look, same number as what I had up here. Same fraction. 3/4, 3/4. They're the same. My answer is the same. So either method is correct. Either method, whether you recognize that 2 is multiplied by 2 to create 4, or if you multiply the two denominators, so 4 times 2 equals 8, either way, you're going to end up with the same result because of this last step of simplifying. Continue on to the next video for some more examples.